Imagine risking everything, your career, your safety, even your life, to stand against a war you believe is morally wrong. Then, after fleeing your country, you're told, "We don't think you're in danger." That's the nightmare facing Nikita and Olga Belov, a Russian mother and son currently trapped in legal limbo in Finland. But here's the twist: their story isn't just about asylum. It's about the messy collision of geopolitics, ethics, and the human cost of choosing principle over compliance. Let's break this down. First, let's talk about Nikita. At 25, he worked as an engineer on projects tied to Russia's military-industrial complex, until he realized his work was fueling the invasion of Ukraine. He quit, knowing full well the consequences: threats, police visits, and eventually fleeing his home. Now, he and his mother, a nurse, face deportation to a country where they could be imprisoned, or worse, for their activism. Finland's immigration service. They've repeatedly said, "Nope, you're not at risk." But here's what fascinates me: Finland, once a neutral buffer between Russia and the West, has become a fortress. Since 2022, they've deported over 1,000 Russians, many of whom, like the Belovs, openly opposed the war. Why the harsh stance? Well, Finland shares an 830-mile border with Russia and joined NATO in 2023. Suddenly, they are not just worried about migrants, they are paranoid about Russian hybrid warfare tactics, like Moscow allegedly sending spies disguised as asylum seekers. So Finland's closed its border entirely, turning away even legitimate refugees. But does that make sense? Or are they throwing moral responsibility out the window for political expediency? Let's zoom in on the Belovs case. Nikita didn't just quit his job, he exposed his employer's lies about their work's military ties. Olga, a nurse, used her skills to send medical aid to Ukraine. In any functioning democracy, these would be heroic acts. But Finland's asylum system treats them like a liability. Their lawyer argues that Nikita's access to classified government data alone should qualify them for protection. Yet Finland's response: "We assess each case individually." That sounds fair, until you realize their system is now rigged to assume Russian dissidents aren't credible threats. Why? Because acknowledging that would mean admitting Russia's a dictatorship, which would force Finland to confront its own complicity. After all, until 2022, Finland was a playground for Russian tourists and oligarchs. Now, they are deporting people who speak out, effectively handing them back to Putin's secret police. It's like inviting someone to dinner, then handing them over to their abusive spouse. But here's the deeper layer: this isn't just about Finland. Europe's entire asylum framework is crumbling under the weight of realpolitik. Bill Browder, a Putin critic whose lawyer died in a Russian prison, calls the Belov case a defining test of Europe's commitment to human rights. And he's right. If countries like Finland start deporting people who oppose authoritarian regimes, what message does that send to the next dissident? "We'll welcome your bravery, right before we send you to jail." This creates a chilling precedent. Why risk your life speaking truth to power if the West slams its doors? The irony? Finland's paranoia about Russian infiltration might actually help Putin. Silence dissenters, and you're not just appeasing Moscow, you're enabling its propaganda that the West doesn't care about human rights. Now, let's talk about the mental toll. The Belovs spent weeks in detention awaiting deportation. Nikita described it as the start of torture, suffering panic attacks and preparing for death. This isn't just cruel, it's a betrayal of what asylum is supposed to represent. Finland's government claims they assess individual circumstances, but how do you quantify the fear of being disappeared by your own country? The Belovs' crime isn't espionage or violence, it's refusing to support a war they knew was unjust. If that's not grounds for protection, what is? So where does this leave us? The Belov case is a microcosm of a world where moral clarity clashes with geopolitical chess. Finland's caught between its new NATO allies and its fear of Russian manipulation. But at what cost? If standing against tyranny means guaranteeing asylum for those who risk everything, Europe's failing the test. Personally, I think the real question isn't whether the Belovs deserve refuge, it's whether the West still believes in the values it claims to uphold. And if we can't answer that, we've already lost.